How do you tell someone they're going to die? It's December 22nd, 1979. Steve McQueen sits in a doctor's office in Cedars-Sinai Hospital. He's been having stomach pain for months, losing weight, coughing. He told himself it was nothing. Stress, age, getting older. But 3 days ago, after Allie threatened to leave if he didn't see a doctor, he finally went. They ran tests, scans, biopsies. Now he's waiting for results. The doctor walks in, closes the door, sits down, and says 3 words that will end everything. But it's not the diagnosis that breaks Steve. It's what he does in the 15 minutes after. The question he asks, the number he writes down, the choice he makes while sitting in that sterile room that will define his final year. What happened in that office? What did Steve McQueen learn about himself in the moment he learned he was dying? This is that story. Steve had been sitting in the waiting room for 45 minutes. The chairs were uncomfortable. Orange plastic with chrome legs, the kind designed to make you not want to stay too long. The walls were beige. The floor was linoleum. Everything smelled like disinfectant and fear. A television was mounted in the corner, playing some game show with the sound off. Contestants jumping up and down, excited about winning a refrigerator or a trip to Hawaii. Their mouths moving silently, celebrating things that didn't matter. Steve watched them and thought about how strange it was. Those people were so happy. And he was sitting here waiting to find out if he was dying. And both things were happening at the same time. In the same world. In the same moment. Allie sat next to him. She'd driven him here. Sat through the check-in, the paperwork, the waiting. She hadn't said much. Just held his hand. Squeezed occasionally. Let him know she was there. "You want some water?" she asked. "No." "Coffee?" "No." "Steve?" "I'm fine." But he wasn't fine. He'd lost 28 pounds in 3 months. His clothes hung off him. His face looked gaunt. At night, the pain in his stomach was so bad he couldn't sleep. He'd lie there, curled up, trying not to wake Ali, until the pain faded enough for him to doze off around dawn. The receptionist called his name. "Mr. McQueen, Dr. Kelly will see you now." Steve stood up. Ali started to stand too. "I should go with you," she said. "No, I need to do this alone." "Steve, please." Ali sat back down, nodded. Her eyes were wet. She knew. They both knew. You don't lose 28 pounds for no reason. You don't cough up blood for months because of stress. Something was wrong. Really wrong. Steve walked through the door, down a hallway, past examination rooms, past nurses who didn't look at him, past other patients waiting for their own bad news. He thought about turning around, walking out, getting in the car and driving away and pretending this wasn't happening. But he kept walking. Dr. Kelly's office was small. A desk, 2 chairs, a window overlooking the parking lot, X-rays clipped to a light box on the wall. Dr. Kelly was maybe 55. Gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses. The kind of face that had delivered bad news so many times it had developed permanent creases of professional sympathy. "Mr. McQueen," he said. "Please, sit down." Steve sat, looked at the X-rays on the wall. Couldn't tell what they showed. Just shadows and light. Evidence of something wrong inside him. "I'm going to be direct," Dr. Kelly said, "because I think that's what you want." "Yeah." The biopsy results came back. "You have mesothelioma. It's a cancer of the tissue that lines the lungs and abdomen. In your case, it's in both locations. It's advanced." The words hit Steve like a physical thing. Cancer. Advanced. He heard them, but they didn't make sense. Like they were in a language he didn't quite speak. "How advanced?" Steve asked. His voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "Stage 4. It's metastasized to your liver and likely your bones." "Treatment?" Dr. Kelly took off his glasses, cleaned them, put them back on. "Treatment options are limited. Chemotherapy might slow the progression. Surgery is not an option given how far it's spread. Radiation might help with pain management, but I need to be honest with you. How long? Steve interrupted. I'm sorry? How long do I have? Dr. Kelly folded his hands on the desk. It's difficult to say precisely. Every case is different. But given the advancement, 6 months to a year, possibly less. 6 months to a year. Steve heard himself laugh. Short? Harsh. That's it? I'm very sorry. I'm 49 years old? I know. 6 months. Possibly less with aggressive progression. Possibly more with treatment. But Mr. McQueen, I need you to understand. Mesothelioma is not curable. Treatment might give you additional time, but it will be difficult. The chemotherapy is aggressive. The side effects are severe. You'll be very sick. And at the end, the outcome is the same. Steve stared at the doctor. At this man who just told him he was going to die. Who looked sad about it. But also resigned. Like he'd done this 100 times before. Like Steve was just another patient. Another terminal diagnosis. Another file that would eventually get stamped deceased and filed away. What causes it? Steve asked. Mesothelioma is typically caused by asbestos exposure. Were you ever exposed to asbestos? Steve thought about it. The Marines, the ships, the race cars, the movie sets, the insulation work he'd done as a kid to make money. Yeah, he said, probably a lot. It can take 20 to 50 years to develop. The exposure would have been decades ago. There's no way you could have known. Steve nodded, felt nothing, everything, a strange emptiness that somehow also felt crushing. Can I ask you something? Steve said. Of course. Do you believe in miracles? Dr. Kelly looked surprised, then sad. It's a simple question. Do you believe in miracles? In cases where someone survives something they shouldn't? Where the diagnosis is wrong or treatment works when it shouldn't? Statistically, yes. There are always outliers. Cases that defy explanation, but I'm not going to be one of them. I can't say that with certainty, but I also can't give you false hope. The statistics for mesothelioma are very clear. The 5-year survival rate is less than 10%. And the 1-year survival rate? About 40%. Steve did the math. What if I don't do treatment? Steve asked. Then the timeline is shorter, possibly significantly shorter, and the end will be more painful. How much more painful? Dr. Kelly leaned forward. Mr. McQueen, I understand this is overwhelming, but I strongly recommend you consider treatment. Even if it only gives you a few more months, those months could be valuable. Time to get your affairs in order. Time with your family. Time to say goodbye. Steve stood up. Suddenly, the chair scraped against the floor. I need to think about it. Of course. Take your time. But Mr. McQueen, we should start treatment as soon as possible. Every week we wait. I said I need to think about it. Steve walked to the door, stopped, turned back. Do I tell my wife? That's your decision. But in my experience, having support during this time is crucial. You shouldn't go through this alone. Steve nodded, opened the door, walked out. Steve walked down the hallway. It seemed longer than before, like it stretched forever. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, doors on either side. Behind each door, someone else's tragedy, someone else's bad news, someone else's ending. He stopped at a water fountain, bent down, drank. The water was cold, metallic. He could taste the pipes. He straightened up, looked at himself in the reflection of the glass door ahead. A ghost. That's what he looked like. 6 months to a year. Steve thought about all the things he'd never do, places he'd never go, movies he'd never make. Not that he wanted to make movies anymore, But the option had always been there, and now it wasn't. He thought about Ali, about telling her, about watching her face as he explained that the life they'd built together was going to end, that she'd have to watch him waste away, that in 6 months or a year she'd be a widow. He thought about Terry and Chad, his kids who barely spoke to him, who just started to forgive him, who just started to let him back into their lives. And now he'd have to tell them he was dying, that they'd lose him just when they'd started to have him again. Steve started walking again, faster. He needed to get out of this building, out of this hallway, out of this moment where everything had just ended. Steve pushed through the doors into the parking lot. The sunlight was harsh, blinding. He stood there, breathing. The air was cool. December in Los Angeles. 70 degrees. Perfect weather. Like nothing was wrong. Like people weren't dying inside that building while the sun shone outside. He heard footsteps behind him. Allie. "What did they say?" she asked. "I have cancer." "What kind?" "Mesothelioma. It's in my lungs, my abdomen, my liver." "How long?" 6 months to a year. Allie wrapped her arms around him, shaking. "We'll fight it," she said. "We'll try everything." "It doesn't get beaten," Steve said quietly. "It just ends you." Allie drove. Steve watched Los Angeles pass by. "I wasted it," he said. "You didn't," Allie said. "You still have time." They reached the ranch at sunset. "I'm not doing chemotherapy," Steve said finally. "I'm not letting this disease decide how my story ends." Allie sat beside him. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. Steve cried for the first time since he was a child. That night, Steve sat on the porch, alone, looking at the stars. Somewhere up there, in all that infinite darkness, was whatever came next. All he knew was that he had limited time, and he was going to make it count. Not by making movies, not by chasing fame, not by running anymore, but by living, really living, for the first time in his life.